it would be helpful for you to share a little bit of your journey and your path and your passion with this group. I think they'll find some very interesting resonant points of similarity.
Sure, yeah. So simply spent the first 9 years of my life in Brooklyn. Grew up right next to Park Slope. And then family moved to New Jersey. I went to school at Yale. I was a fairly bad student. I think it was interesting. I think that I found high school more challenging than college, which really frustrated me. And so I just kind of slacked off in college.
I'm sure the trustees of Yale will be glad to know that, right?
I saw the dean the other day. I didn't mention it to him, but yeah, my high school was hard. And so I kind of focused on making friends. And so one of my friends ended up starting a company that was in the first batch of Y Combinator called Kiko. And it was an online calendar company. It wasn't very sexy. And he ended up selling it on eBay after a year. And that was my first real experience seeing startup tech. My dad had been a programmer, so I'd always been around computers, but seeing startups, that was very new. And we sat there and we refreshed the page on eBay. In the beginning of the day, it was $50,000. By the end, it was $258,000, which for me, I was working on a political campaign making $3,000 a month. That seemed like infinite money. Now, the part that I should say is that they basically lived in a one-bedroom apartment making $1,000 a month for a year before they got that. But that kind of opened my mind a little bit to what was going on. They said they wanted to start another company, an online reality TV show, which I thought was the dumbest startup idea I've ever heard in my life. And they were going to drive across the country because they wanted to start in San Francisco. And I'd never been to San Francisco. I had just finished working as a finance director for a campaign, Kwasi Nfume's 2006 Senate campaign. And I needed a vacation. I was 23, they were 22. And so I asked them, hey, can I join you? And they said, okay. And I said, so what's the plan for the road trip? And they said, well, we're going to get on 80 and drive straight till we get to San Francisco. And that sounded horrible. So I planned a whole trip. And when we got there, it was a beautiful day in San Francisco. The Blue Angels were flying over the city. It was sunny. It was in October and looked amazing. And I was like, this is a really cool place. And then they said, well, we're not going to be here. We actually are going to crash in a basement in Mountain View, which was a lot less nice. And so basically I was there for a week while they were starting their company. I had nothing to do, so I tried to help. They had $50,000 investment from Paul Graham and YC, but they didn't know how to open a bank account, so I opened up a bank account, and I found an apartment. And at the end, as Justin was driving me to the airport, he was like, you should join this company. We want you to be a co-founder. And I was like, this is a horrible idea. Why would I want to do that? And he said, just think about it. I flew across the country, and long story short, 2 weeks later, I had given up the lease in my apartment. I had kind of broken up with my girlfriend, and I had moved across the country for the first time.
What is kind of breaking up with your girlfriend? Kind of being pregnant?
As your moderator, you do not have to answer that.
Thank you. That's a good one to dodge. So anyways, that kind of entered us into the world. And then what I loved about the world was that it was sink or swim. It was the first time I felt like it was something hard to do. And I'm lazy when things aren't hard, but I work really hard when things are. And so within 6 months, I was the CEO of Justin TV. We had recruited another co-founder, so there was 4 of us. We launched it, pivoted. And the end result was that Justin TV/Twitch, which is what it became, sold to Amazon for $1 billion. And SocialCam, yeah. It was a good day. SocialCam, which was a spinoff, sold to Autodesk for $60 million.
So no more basement apartment in Mountain View.
No. No. But it's San Francisco, so my apartment isn't that nice.
There we go. So, accidental technologists aside, you have seen some things that work and that don't, and it led you to get involved more formally with Y Combinator. Talk a little bit about Y Combinator, what works, and where there are opportunities to scale.
Yeah, so YC started 10 years ago, and basically it was a startup incubator or startup accelerator, one of the first that kind of rose from the ashes of the 2001 kind of craziness. And back then the model was so simple. The founder, Paul Graham, had sold his company to Yahoo and made a bunch of money. He wanted to angel invest, but he didn't really know how. He wanted to help companies, but he didn't really know how. And so he decided to start a program. The program was really not meant to make money. It was kind of meant to give back. And so he just wanted to be around really smart technical people and help them kind of go through the path that he went through. And so the first class only had 8 companies. It was in Cambridge. It wasn't even here. One of the companies was Reddit, so it kind of started off pretty good. But from that base, he basically iterated it every 6 months. New program, made it better and better and better. And I think that what ended up happening is YC became the standard because we always put tech first. We never compromised on, we never really compromised. We always just expected more out of our founders. And I participated in YC twice as a founder, and both times, it's funny, I tell companies now, when you're in a startup, you have a gun to your head. Y Combinator just puts 2 more to your head. And turns out that good founders respond, bad founders don't. And so today YC in the last batch accepted 118 companies. There were about 6,500 companies who applied. And regularly we're told that it's the best crop of companies that come out of any incubator anywhere in the world, best demo day anywhere in the world, and I believe it. If you look at the last demo day we had, I guess 2 ago, the last one we had was last week, but the one that occurred last summer, those companies raised cumulatively $170 million in the demo day and the 3 months afterwards. So it's basically the most impactful way to get your company started if you don't already have a network in the Valley, and a very significant way to get money, a good valuation, and a lot of good advice very quickly. The program's only 3 months long.
I'm struck by what you said, which is that most of the entrepreneurs are accustomed to having a gun put to their head, and this just sort of accelerates it. That notion of not having a safety net is something that I think pretty much everyone in the room can relate to. For people like Christopher Williams, who've been trailblazers, the success came because failure was not an option, and always sort of creating a path. And I know that that's true for a lot of the folks in this room. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the way of replication of the model across the country. What I'm trying to get to is, how do we take this from being just a series of milestones regionally to much more of a national movement?
That's very hard. I firmly believe that more than 50% of the black CEOs will be created in the tech world as opposed to any other world in the next 50 years. I firmly believe that San Francisco will continue to be the hub of the tech world for the next 50 years plus. I think what I want to do and what I do when I speak to people across the country is, I don't want to say to people that they should be trying to build Silicon Valley where they are, because I don't think they can. I don't think we can build New York in San Francisco. I don't think New York can build San Francisco in New York. I think what they can do is they can provide spaces where there are other startups that you can start the journey with. That's what's more important. It's not about building massive buildings or districts or yada, yada, yada. It's about having a room that people can go to where the other people in that room are doing startups. And then I think it's having a path. And most of the paths are going to end up here. So it's having someone here to kind of catch the good ones, bring them into the system, and make sure they're doing what they need to do to be successful. And so that's what I try to do. When I go around the country, when I go around the world, I tell everyone that I meet that interacts with startups, if you see a good one, I'll spend an hour with them on the phone personally. And if I think that they're good, I'll do everything I can to get them into YC.
Last point would love you to respond to, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A before we move into the next section. But one of the opportunities that I think we can shine a bright light on is the necessity of a stronger, more robust national ecosystem. So as that next generation of whether they're African American, Hispanic, Asian, male, female CEOs, that they ascend with a corresponding cohort of investment bankers, lawyers, consultants, so that there's a broader professional class. How troubled are you by perhaps the lack of consistent growth across all the professional aspects?
I mean, I think that there's definitely, I see it here that I see many, many fewer African Americans here in the Valley starting companies. And a lot of my friends who were successful and who've made money have not made their money here. They've made their money in New York and in finance, or they've made their money in real estate, or so on and so forth. So that is really disheartening. I think that there's kind of a negative path and a positive path. On the negative path, I think that when you try to fit a square peg in a round hole here, it never works. So people need to understand the rules of this game, and they can't just kind of move in and expect success. I meet far too many founders whose startups are fundamentally and fatally flawed, who try to ignore that fact and come out here, and they're almost all universally not successful. I think on the flip side, I think there are so many opportunities to help the people who are good at math and science pivot towards programming and CS and then get out here. And I think that that is going to be the base. And I think they're going to bring all those amazing professionals that they're friends with into their companies. That network is going to be their competitive advantage. But we've got to start getting our kids leaning that way, as opposed to leaning. I'm just talking about we talked yesterday about basketball and rapping and stuff. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about how do you lean a mechanical engineering kid towards CS? How do you lean a chemistry kid towards CS? If we can start leaning all of those kids towards CS, instead of working for someone else, they'll be the boss one day.
Okay, so I lied. I said one more question. I have one more for you. 2 phenomenally transformative exits. Very, very successful career. How come you're not on TV? Why don't we know about you? Why aren't you not a celebrity?
That's a weird question.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, don't you feel a little bit of affirmative obligation to be a much more prominent role model?
I personally recruited 5 black founders for this YC batch. I think at least one of them is going to build a $1 billion company. I think that's...
Want to tell us who he or she is,
No,
we
I
can get in early?
Well, you can come talk to me afterwards, actually, if you want to know that. I've already invested. Eric's already invested. And so I think the best way that I can have impact is through that. I think that I hold the keys to give anyone an amazing shot out here. And if I am, here ready to catch those good companies and then can bring them up to the next level, that's far better than being on TV. I feel like I don't want to have a wide message. I want to have a very, very narrow message to the kids who are talented, who are good, who want to do this, and just need to take the next step. And I can get them there. It's very easy for me to get them there. I know all the rules and all the people. I'm a partner at Y Combinator. I've seen companies where they come into Y Combinator with a $2 million valuation, they leave with a $20 million valuation. That is all available for those kids. So I'd much rather do that than be on TV, talking to non-founders.
Point well taken. Let's open it up. If there are questions, just raise your hand and then tell us who you are, where you're from, and have at it. Questions for Michael? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'll just talk louder. Hi, Rodney Mayer, actually based here in the Bay Area, CEO of a small company called Proximic. To your last point, and I guess to the question on the floor, is there a sense of, we have had an offline conversation, had one yesterday, is much of the game today kids need to see it in order to believe it? So the kids need to see you, to his point, on TV, talking about your success, or saying, hey, here's how I did it, I took a chance. Is that part of it? Or how does a kid in Brooklyn, I grew up in East Flatbush as well, right? So how does a kid in Brooklyn going to Brooklyn Tech know, I need to come west, I need to drive across 80, I need to get out there and get this guy? How does he or she find you?
I don't know. You know what's funny is that when you want to help startups, you have to help, but you can't help them too much, right? And I think that that's why I always separate the conversation of how do we produce more black technical people who work at big companies versus people who are going to be founders. Because founders are self-starters. And so I don't think I'm that hard to find. I don't think Y Combinator is that hard to find. And I think the people who are motivated will find me. And I think that the more people that I help, the more that I see the word getting out. The thing that I do to make it easy is I'll get on the phone with people. If you look at my day, I spend over 50% of my time talking to companies that have not gotten into YC. Companies that honestly, I know probably won't get into YC. Because I kind of feel like if I can be accessible on that micro level, and if those people go out and say, hey, Michael helped me, he got on the phone with me and he didn't have to, the word gets out and those people talk to their friends and their friends. But I feel like it's far more effective for me to do it that way, because then I can be, I can't give startup advice to millions of people at the same time. It doesn't really work that way. So that's how I think about it.
Denmark.
Denmark West. See, apparently the crowd doesn't approve of me asking you questions. Denmark West, Connectivity Capital Partners out of New York. Thank you for being here, Mike. Quick question for you. If I heard you correctly, you said that you thought that what became Justin TV was a bad idea.
Yes.
And yet you moved across the country to then become CEO
Of a bad idea.
that you thought was a bad idea.
Yes.
So that is in and of itself a great story. I'd love to understand better. But the question is, how did you conceptualize the good idea that could be out of that bad idea? Okay. So then how do I map the process from I'm going to be the CEO of a bad idea to I'm going to have one part spin out to become Social Cam and sell to Autodesk, and the other part become Twitch and
I think it's
sell that?
simple, right? I think, you're talking about how did I see the ride before I got on, right? You don't see what the ride looks like before you get on. So the real question is, why did you get on the ride?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
For me, it was very simple. I was working in politics. There's a campaign every 4 years. My best friend asked me to start a company with him. That happens once in a lifetime. Take that shot. If it doesn't work, campaign comes around again. Now, I gave up working on the Obama campaign. I didn't realize that campaign was coming.
So you had some great options, is what you're saying.
I mean, I don't know if working on the campaign would have been great. It would have been fun, but I'm not sure if it would have been like, whatever grunt work I was assigned, I don't think it would have been life transforming, but I would have felt like I was part of a bigger thing, of course. But yeah, no, I kind of always looked at it that way. I kind of always looked at like, and you have to understand, I did this when I was young, right? I mean, that's the other thing is that like, talking to a 23-year-old founder, there's no risk. I went to school at Yale. I go back to Reunion, it's depressing. Literally, like I thought there'd be congressmen and CEOs and all this stuff. And it's just a bunch of people who took the easy path, or a bunch of people who spent their 20s trying to find themselves. And it's like the people that I know are successful spent their 20s working hard. And so, yeah, that was the call. It also helped that they had $50,000 funding, which I thought was like an infinite amount of money. And it also helped that they had recruited our fourth co-founder to actually build the camera that Justin would wear on his head. But I mean, it still didn't look like a good company. Nobody wanted to invest, so. But yeah, that's why. That's how I made the decision.
Well, you heard, one last question from Hank, and then we'll wrap up. Tell everyone who you are.
Hank Williams. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I also run a organization called Platform focused on this issue, diversifying innovation economy. We have an annual conference coming this October. Hope you're all there. But my question, or I guess I have a challenge which I'd like you to react to, which is the idea that, well, two elements of what she said I concern me. One is the idea that, you know, I live in New York, and I know if Fred Wilson, the biggest VC in New York, were here, you know, he'd be pretty aggressively disagreeing that the only place to do this is Silicon Valley. Not to say that it may not be.
You would ask him where his biggest deals were, and they're all here.
So the point is, I mean, you know, clearly Silicon Valley is ahead of New York. No question about that, and I'm not debating that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, everyone isn't going to be I mean, the circumstance that you described, particularly for a young kid of color riding across the country without a safety net and without, I mean, it's not going to happen. That is not as accessible because we in our community don't have the sort of necessary social capital as well as just financial capital. The social capital which you had, that you had a buddy who was doing, I mean, it's a wonderful story, but I mean, for so many folks, it's not going to you know, it just can't quite play out that way. And my view is that I want to see an enormous number of people believing that they can do what you did, even if they don't have a plane ticket to Silicon Valley and a place where they can rent an apartment.
Let me respond to that. So basically, we have to separate out getting access to the tech world from being a founder, right? We use the example of the MBA. Founders are like people in the MBA. It's very, very, very hard to start a company. And even if you make it 10x easier, it's still very, very hard. And this is a game where most people fail. And I think that's fundamentally different. I think that's why we can't confuse these two worlds, right? There are a lot of great jobs out here that you can make a lot of money, be very successful, that have nothing to do with being founder of a tech company. And so I think that there's other messages and other approaches that we need to take to basically start diversifying the companies out here, especially because there's so much wealth being created out here and disproportionately Black people don't have access to it. I think on the flip side, when we're telling a message about how you be a founder, we want to set a super high bar. Because if we were to tell somebody getting into the NBA was easy, we'd just be lying it to them. And I think that like there's a whole system that helps people get into the NBA, but let's be clear, the vast majority of people fail. And so I always tell that to founders in the beginning, you gotta be comfortable going down a path where the expected outcome is failure. And most people out there don't wanna take the risk to be an entrepreneur, and we need to be able to find them opportunities in tech. But like any good problem, you got to segment it out, and you got to get the right people focusing on the right parts of it. And so I just want to focus on those CEOs, because those CEOs are going to disproportionately hire Black people. And that's how I can have an impact at that other level. Maybe this is one of the reasons why I don't take my message nationally, though, right? Because it is a hard message. It's not an inspiring everyone can be a CEO message, because I don't think that's true.
I mean, in the work I do, I obviously, well, perhaps I shouldn't say obviously, but I also don't believe everyone can be a CEO. But I've been doing this. I've been in the tech world for 25 years. I've started 4 companies. I know everyone in New York who is thinking about starting a company or wanting. They all come see me.
Yeah.
And so I know all of them, and I see the bad ideas, and I see the good ideas. More bad than good, no question about it.
Sure.
But I do see amazing people that are doing really cool things. And so I guess the distinction would be, I'm not quite as pessimistic about capacity, but I do think that there are still issues of access, even when the capacity and the fire and the willingness and the intellectual,
There's a huge access issue. There's a massive access issue, right? The fact that there are only 8 companies with Black founders in YC is horrible. Like, I'm working on that literally every day. I think there's definitely an access issue, right? But I never want to lie to these kids. Out of 120 companies, only 3 of them are going to be significant. And that's after being weeded out of 6,500 applicants. So out of 6,500 applicants, only 3 are going to be significant. You don't know those odds, then you don't have the information you need to be successful in this game.
Last question back here. Please just tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Rich Wolowski. I'm president and COO of Gordon Food Service. This is a conversation, correct? So I can.
Yes.
Or a fight, I mean,
So you said something that really struck me about that Silicon Valley is the hub, and other companies need to be developed elsewhere and then become the hub eventually.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that I lived that life back in 2000. We started a company, an internet startup company in Boise, Idaho. And the reason why we started it in Boise, Idaho was because from a startup perspective, there was abundant talent and it was a lower startup cost. And so I remember sleeping under the desk. I remember not making payroll. I remember, everything that you probably lived,
Yeah.
I lived it. And I did it for 4 years. We ended up selling that company to a Silicon Valley company, and it's thriving, it's doing great. But from an incubator standpoint, it made a lot of sense for us when we started this company. It started elsewhere versus here, and it became a Silicon Valley company eventually. So I just really support what you're saying, that is a great approach.
Yeah. I love that approach, as opposed to trying to replicate Silicon Valley in Idaho, right, which is hard.
And, we have the same haircut, so we
Last word right up front. Tell us who you are again.
Yeah, I'm Clarence Wooten. I'm a serial entrepreneur, founder of VentureFund.io, which you'll all hopefully hear a lot more about in the near future. Michael, you and I have talked. Hank, you and I have talked quite a bit. The reason I wanted to really go back to the debate that the two of you guys were having. As you know, I spent my entire career as a serial entrepreneur being based in Maryland. Did a startup, exited that startup successfully, sold it to VeriSign. Almost moved to Silicon Valley in 1998, and I regret not doing so, even though I had success, even being based in the Maryland, Northern Virginia area. Didn't come out here to 2011 when it finally dawned on me, really what you're talking about. The tech industry is a lot like the entertainment industry, a lot like Hollywood, no different. You can be an independent filmmaker or an actor and live in any state in this country and be somewhat successful, but you're not going to become Denzel Washington or Tom Cruise or Will Smith unless you move your ass to Hollywood. That's really the bottom line at the end of the day. And so once I finally came to that conclusion, I didn't want my founder, my serial entrepreneur talent to go completely to waste, so I got my ass out here 4 years ago and got into the ecosystem. Now I have relationships, that really was Shervin Fisherbar that kicked me in the ass and said, Clarence, get your butt out here. So now I'm here. But that's really the difference. And New York can be Broadway, right? But it's not going to be Hollywood. It's as simple as that.
I'm not arguing that just to be clear, I'm not arguing that Silicon Valley isn't the Mecca, but I worry if we, when we speak in absolute terms, we take someone like Clarence, who would not have come to Silicon Valley at the beginning of his career, and he was already successful when he moved here. He had exits. I want to, maybe it won't be a unicorn, maybe it won't be $1 billion exit, but Clarence is actually an example of what I'm talking about.
But it's my job to find Clarence and get him in YC. And if I get Clarence in YC, even if he decides to go back, at least he goes back with his eyes open, knowing exactly what exists out there, and that's the best I can do.
Look, that's. Yeah. I don't argue. I'm not arguing against that. I want to have a positive.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not negative. Good founders come from everywhere. I never want to say that. I just think, God, it's easier to build a company here.
I think there's another analogy, and so I'm no Van Jones, but I certainly felt like he took me to church yesterday, as he did some of us at the brunch. If Van were here, I think he would kind of take it a slightly different spin and a call to action, and he would say 50 years ago, young children, teenagers of color across this country, against their parents' best wishes, felt a call to action, a call to conscience, and they got on the bus and they went down south and they fought opposition and they registered people to vote to be part of the franchise. And so whether it's Boise, Idaho, whether it's Silicon Valley, whether it's Washington, D.C., the geography is a secondary issue. What the opportunity is here, and we're going to shift in a minute and talk about something much more fundamental, is the transformation about getting young children of color at every stage to understand that this is the new currency, this is the new universal language. And so whether you speak it with a San Francisco twist or an Austin twist or whatever the twist is, you're speaking the language. And so there are many different roads. I think that's your point, Hank, but we're all headed on the same journey. So with that, join me in thanking Michael again.
This is awesome. Thank you.